My name is Janelle Drouin-Wallet. I am an assistant professor at the University of Montreal, and my line of research is essentially working with cell reprogramming technologies, converting skin cells from patients with neurodegenerative disorders to brain cells to be able to study them. Ultimately, the main goal, I would say, is to develop personalized medicine, to be able to help the patients. If they give us samples, we would be able to perform and tailor therapies that is specific to their disease. We've made tremendous progress and we live longer, essentially. But with that comes a bigger burden in terms of people developing Alzheimer's, other dementias, and other neurodegenerative disorders. What I would love to happen with my research is that at some point it becomes mainstream that we do all sorts of tests and we can actually tailor the treatment strategy based on what we see with the cells that we've generated using the technology we've been developing in the lab.
Our guest presenter today is Dr. Jon Doan, and his presentation is Punching Back: Why Canadians Living with Parkinson's Disease Should Exercise and How. Dr. Jon Doan is an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Physical Education at the University of Lethbridge and the incoming Dean of Health Sciences at U of L. Jon completed his undergraduate degree in biological engineering at the University of Guelph, his master's degree in biomechanical engineering and ergonomics at Queen's University, and his PhD in behavioral neuroscience at the University of Lethbridge. Jon has been in Lethbridge since 2002 and has been a principal investigator in U of L's Engineering and Human Performance Laboratory since 2005. Jon's research investigates the mechanics of human movement. This interest includes comparing the benefits of pharmacological, surgical, and exercise therapeutic approaches to managing physical and mental health challenges amongst people living with early, mild, or moderate Parkinson's disease. Jon has worked closely with the Parkinson Association of Alberta since 2002. So now I will welcome Dr. Doan.
Just let me share. Great, thank you, Declan, and thanks to Parkinson's Association Alberta for having me here today. Really exciting to get a chance to talk during Parkinson Awareness Month. I think the theme for the month, community, is one that my talk will come back to several times as we go over the concepts for exercise and the needs for exercise. The contribution of community to our exercise behavior will certainly be a big part of the story. Sorry about that. Speaking of community, then, really important for me to acknowledge up front the community that I work with, or that I participate with, and that I share my success with. This is a lot of hardworking students. Here are some of them shown, and it is just countless numbers of dedicated participants, caregivers, individuals interested in research and willing to become part of our community that way. I'll acknowledge up front several sources of funding as well for a good chunk of the research I'll talk about today, which is our ice skating work. And important, again, as I consider my community and the Parkinson's community, is some valuable mentors of mine, Dr. Leslie Brown, Dr. Ian Wishaw, and an ongoing colleague here, Dr. Natalie de Bruin. So I want to start with three key messages that I hope people take home from the talk today. And that is, when it comes to exercise and activity, we need to be central and intentional. We need to be regular and social. That's really back to that community piece for sure. And I'll make the argument here today that we need to be vigorous with that exercise as well. When I think of intentional, I wanted to start with the email that I received several years ago. Now it's on your screen here. This is an individual who came across our skating therapy research through a bit of an online search and intentionally connected that with their own experience or use that to generate their own exercise experience, which was returning to roller skating. You can see a little later in the email, it says that their intentionality is about generating some funding to continue to explore that therapy on their own. And in fact, I was able to work with this participant and with some of their caregiver staff as well to help them round up some funding, including a small amount of funding from the BBC to make a documentary about their roller skating experience. And it looks, and I hope this works, something like this. So an intentionality of exercise that this client was both central to and deeply connected with. And this is a level of activity then when we look at some of the motions, the hip flexion, the foot crossover, the balance challenges, all those sorts of things that really, as we carry on and look at sort of the outcomes or the values of exercise, that really have some both meaning for them and potential for maintaining important function. So this idea about being central to the research experience, being sort of the lead, the personal lead of that community, really comes from a recent paper from Blas Bloom, and you see the title here, Including People with Parkinson's Disease in Clinical Study Design and Execution, a Call to Action. And I'm going to follow along three important concepts from this paper in my talk today. I like the paper for several reasons, not least of which Bloom, both figuratively and literally, is one of the biggest researchers in the world of Parkinson's disease. Here's Bloom with several colleagues, part of the Parkinson Net research group in Luxembourg and throughout Europe. Bloom is a physiotherapist, about 6'10" in stature, and just a wonderful advocate for exercise and research amongst people living with Parkinson's disease. So Bloom's paper about making or encouraging people living with Parkinson's disease to be central to their clinical experiments and their exercise opportunities really centers on three requests or three common themes amongst the patients. The first is, what can I do to maintain independence and quality of life? And in the exercise world then, or in the activity world, this is really about having that solid foundation for activity, and that foundation being balance, right? Balance for locomotion, balance for activities of daily living, living for quality of life. And we've had an interesting chance in the lab to do some detailed examinations of balance amongst people living with Parkinson's disease using some of our research technologies there. And specifically what we can do then is look at in on and off medicated conditions and pre and post exercise conditions, look at balance function in a close-up, both in terms of time and in terms of what generates balance, which is controlling the force due to gravity acting on our mass, right? Look at what that balance looks like. And the interesting takeaway for this from us, and I won't belabor the data here, but I'll use them as a way to sort of color things, is that in challenging conditions, so where these peaks rise up is where balance is being perturbed by the balance testing device. We see challenges rising for our people with Parkinson's disease in the off medication condition to levels that could start to challenge balance, then activities of daily living, and then quality of life. And most interesting is that we see a change in balance strategy as well, where again, our participants who are people living with Parkinson's off their medication during these perturbed conditions started to control their balance in a completely different way. Instead, again, I don't want to belabor the biomechanics, but instead of controlling their balance around a single point and making slight perturbations around that single point, they started to control their balance around a pair of points, both of their feet separately and alternatively. And that larger range and different strategy, again, may be part of subsequent challenges to balance, activity, and quality of life. We saw a similar result when we had a chance to look at walking behavior in the lab in anxious conditions. So that's when we were having people walking on an elevated walkway, and in controlled conditions when people were walking along the floor. And again, we see a similar response here. If we look at this example of the Parkinson's patients on their medication, here now in the floor condition in the white bars, or in the elevated condition in the gray bars, we're seeing that context, just like the context or the situation of being off meds, now that context of being anxious or having attention diverted is leading to some challenges in getting walking started and keeping walking going. Right? Both of these forms of challenge then, so the cyclical challenge we may get from being at low levels of medication, the environmental challenge we may get from being in anxious or attention distracting conditions, like in this case, elevated walking, but in the more practical case, maybe walking through a crowded space, walking through a doorway. Right? We want to find a way to manage those challenges by having the most functional balance or walking control system we can. And we do that then through maintaining function with exercise. So that why exercise question, when it ties back to activities of daily living and quality of life, is really answered by or addressed by some recent research. Here's a review paper about aerobic exercise. And I think in the abstract here, we're really getting a great highlight that says, well, multiple streams of scientific research now are showing us that aerobic exercise and cardiovascular fitness has direct influence on neurological mechanisms that are mediating Parkinson's disease progression. It's a way to control that progression, right, and lead to higher function in activities of daily living, right, particularly in these challenging conditions of on-off med states, environmental concerns, right, and allowing us to maintain that kind of function. So these sorts of things and this level of exercise really requires some pre-plan, some intentional, right, structure and planning for exercise, and doing that in an ongoing sort of programmatic kind of way. The second question, if we go back to Bloom's paper about centering people living with Parkinson's inside our understanding and clinical examination of Parkinson's, the question that came from interested participants was, what can I do to manage motor and non-motor symptoms? And again, multiple streams of research would show us that exercise is an important part of biological health, psychological health, and social health for everyone. That's how we can start to control some challenges in those areas, right? The best exercise dose, right? So size or volume of exercise that we can take is something that's a vigorous intensity, right? A meaningful length, and a physical activity that you enjoy. Right? We need to have those pieces coming together to generate the exercise effect. What can help do those things? And I completely understand, and I share right? People who express, oh, I have a challenge, I don't like exercising, or I find it difficult to make sure I get there every day, and all those sorts of things. I have those same slowdowns myself, right? And so some things that can help overcome those barriers is exercising with cues, exercising with feedback, maybe a wearable watch, or feedback from a coach, or exercise diary, or those sorts of things that give a little ongoing support to the exercise, and exercising with others inside a group. All research shows us all three of those mechanisms are great ways to improve the three key components of exercise: frequency, intensity, and time. So I just wanted to look at a couple of cute examples from our ice skating, because we're finding the visual information from ice skating is being key to driving the exercise behavior. Here we have a pair of participants in our ice skating studies doing a parallel activity, doing some stick handling on the ice, or in the second example, in the lab as a bit of a mock-up. And we found then that using the cues, right, that encourage these big upper extremity movements, right, and so show, what size of movement to make along with the program, led to real improvements in both gross motor skills, so how quickly we could do a repetitive task like pressing a button, and also fine motor skills. So the upper example here is looking at a reach to eat task, right? And we're looking at the fluidity of the movement, the rate of the movement, all sorts of things, and seeing that this cued exercise in regular fashion is leading to improvements in that behavior. Again, as a researcher, I like to tie together with what's available in the press right now. And a recent paper then looked at this what to exercise idea and really did a review of forms of exercise that are beneficial. Oh, we lost a little bit of the visual there, but that's okay. The take home from this paper then is that exercise should touch on, right? Exercise as neurotherapy should touch on 4 different categories. There should be an endurance component to it. So working the cardiovascular system, right? Should be a resistance component to it. So working the musculoskeletal system. Should be a flexibility component to it. Also working the musculoskeletal system, but in a different way, right? By extending that. And there should be a functional component to it. That is balance and multi-component training that's helping participants and exercisers generate some capacity, some reserve capacity for controlling their balance and making movements. One last piece I want to touch on here inside this how to or what to exercise component is coming back to what may be some of the challenges. Here's a quote from Parkinson's original essay on the shaking palsy that stems directly from Parkinson's observation of his clinical population in the streets of London, right? He noted that legs are not raised to that height or with that promptitude which the will directs. Certainly are motor challenges, obviously, right? But it's important not to pair those challenges, the things that the signs and symptoms that we're exercising against or trying to control through exercise. It's important not to pair them with low levels of support. Somewhat dated study now, but I think this phenomenon still exists from Mike Ravnick showed that too many people, greater than 90% in Ravnick's study, living with Parkinson's disease had little or no information from healthcare professionals about the benefits of physical activity. It's important to get information from experts about how to exercise, what kind of exercise to do, how tolerable is exercise. And it's important to feed that information back to your healthcare team as well. Say, hey, what I've taken up is Tai Chi, and I'm really finding some advantages here, and also discuss some of the challenges. I'm really getting fatigued afterwards, and maybe is there a different schedule? It's important to tie the exercise message with the whole healthcare team, so we're getting the best quality approach there, the most feasible and the most effective. And so summarizing then this question from the centering paper, I would say that regular, moderate to vigorous physical exercise is really all of our evidence showing is the primary thing people living with Parkinson's can do to manage their motor and their non-motor symptoms. The Bloom paper then raised one more question, right? And again, I'm paraphrasing these a little. There's one activity where my Parkinson's almost disappears. Do you think that means anything? Right? And so I'll talk a little bit about our skating studies, though I note from the chat here, and it's true, we have moved into boxing as well, which is a great form of exercise. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit in the chat. Right? So we came across this quite serendipitously. Several people with Parkinson's in support groups in various places told us that they still had this capacity for ice skating and still enjoyed getting out there and doing so. Sorry, I keep losing my mouse. And sure enough, when we tested this amongst the largest group of people living with Parkinson's disease across the country, along with controls, we found that there were some real benefits from ice skating as a form of exercise. The skating behavior amongst our people living with Parkinson's disease was significantly improved locomotion compared to the walking behavior. And after the skating experience, there was a significant improvement in walking as well. This overflow effect from the exercise that most exercise therapists would tell us with repeated exposures to, you can build up that overflow effect to actual gains. We had a chance to chase the skating behavior down a little bit more. I'm back to my cues idea here and show back inside our balance device that it's the visual sensation of skating and visual sensation of different vigorous physical activities that may be part of what provokes this paradoxical movement. Right. So you can see inside our balance testing device here, we were able to show people living with Parkinson's whose balance we were testing this first person view of the ice skating phenomenon or ice skating behavior. And what we found, a lot of data on this graph, but here's balance measurements from a participant living with Parkinson's disease down the left. Here's their control match down the right. We're looking at a top-down view of their balance in various conditions. And the one to key on is right here. This is where we're showing them that first-person video of ice skating. And in this case, our person living with Parkinson's disease who's participating in the study has balance control every bit as good as their age and sex matched control subject here. So really reinforcing for us that this vigorous activity, which we know generates some locomotor and other physical benefits for people living with Parkinson's disease who participate, is maybe primed by these visual cues and this familiarity with ice skating. I was really, I guess, reinforced by a recent paper that came out that was talking about some compensation strategies for gait impairments. And again, this is back to Baz Bloom's group here as one of the authors, along with a number of different researchers, Alfonso Fasano from University of Toronto, and a number of different world leaders in research on people living with Parkinson's disease. And the paper, it's going to be a little tough to see in this version, but I'll talk us through it. The paper has this great, almost sort of pullout, like a poster or a centerfold poster from an old-time magazine that was available for people. And it's got all these strategies for overcoming gait impairments. And what was really exciting for me, as I zoom in a little bit, that one of these strategies was pretending that you're ice skating to get your gait started and to keep gait going. And the other one was actually skating or roller skating as exercise for improving gait amongst people living with Parkinson's disease. As far as we know, our lab is the only one in the world that's investigating skating amongst people living with Parkinson's disease. So this is really exciting to see our work reflected in this way. I'm going to end here, I think, by coming back to my intentionality idea. So I'll talk about another skater who got a hold of me. This is a participant, DFO. At the time I wrote up this case study, DFO was a 51-year-old female, been diagnosed with Parkinson's for 3 years. After a bit of an interaction with one of her children that spurred her to return to the ice. She's passionate to return to figure skating. She's on the ice 3+ times per week. She is working with a skating coach and a strength coach to work quite diligently on her function here, and she's working her way through some organized ice dancing and skating competition levels to really, again, support her interest in exercise and activity. Quotes from DFO and from some other participants in this form of the skating examination really reinforce this idea about intentionality. I can capitalize on this exercise behavior, and I can repeat this exercise behavior in a meaningful way if I'm really intentional about what it means to me. If I find something that's important to me, and I don't need to focus exclusively on skating, more on the intentionality piece. It's important to find an exercise that's meaningful, enjoyable, and feasible for you, and then attend to participating in that in a vigorous and effective kind of way. So the summary here on this section is, if there are these activities that are enabling, that feel great, that let motor and non-motor symptoms subside during the activity for an amount of time post-activity, or even if they just reduce them, right, during the time of the activity, that's the exercise for you, right? Research shows us that kind of capacity does mean something. It means something both neurologically. Here's a function that a lot of capacity persists for. It also means something psychologically. Here's something that you're going to enjoy doing, probably have a familiarity with, and are going to enjoy doing going forwards. So capitalize on that, right? Exercise in the way, in the areas and things that interest you. Thank you for your attention. Very happy to answer questions about, or try to answer questions anyways, about exercise, things you're interested in trying or hearing about, or challenges that you may have in the area as well.
Great. Thank you very much for that presentation, Dr. Doan. We do have quite a few questions rolling in here, so I'll get started.
Sure.
For anybody in the audience that wants to ask questions, again, please use the little chat blurb icon on the bottom and type out your questions to me. I've sent you a message there, and you can just reply to that message if you have questions. To get us started, what's your best advice on how to get started with regular, moderate to vigorous exercise for those with no exercise habits prior to their Parkinson's diagnosis?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would suggest certainly going with someone else, or exercising with someone else, and someone who you feel comfortable. I'll say being vulnerable with, right? I mean, and vulnerable is not, that you'll be injured or something like that. Vulnerable is, we all look a little bit messy exercising at some level, right? I mean, even the most elite athletes get sweaty and unkept when they exercise, right? And the less and less elite amongst them, and I would certainly put myself in that lower group, may become more sweaty and more unkept, right? That's okay. That's part of exercise. And in fact, psychologists would tell us that's an important and enjoyable part of exercise, is to get into a different physical and mental state through the process of exercise. So I would find somebody that you trust, that you have a good, humorous relationship with, or like congenial relationship with, and who is an exerciser, and go along with them. I mean, it can be helpful to have a professional, and in terms of safety and that sort of thing, I would certainly suggest, working with a coach at some level, but even one-on-one with a coach can be somewhat daunting unless there's someone there to support us. So could be a child, could be a work friend, could be a colleague from church. It could be, whatever you want to make that assessment. But I would go with someone else who is familiar with exercise, and have them as a bit of a model and as a bit of a encouragement as well.
Yeah, great answer. So quite a few questions coming in, so maybe we'll do a little bit of rapid fire here. When you say vigorous exercise, can you relate that to target heart rate zones? Is there something that they should be aiming for as far as heart rate goes?
Yeah. I mean, we often hear, for training purposes, that 220 minus your age, up to now the limits there are going to escape me. I think anything above 100 and less than it depends a little bit on your age, but probably less than 130 is probably a target zone there. But again, you're going to want to work with someone who's got some of your medical information, is tying that together. It's not quite as it's certainly not blanket, depending on either confounders, previous balance challenges, and all sorts of things. A good sort of rule of thumb is you should be to a space where it would be difficult to carry on a conversation, right? So both your respiratory exchange and your intensity and attention level mean that you couldn't carry on a conversation, right? So we want to get to that kind of activity level. But for specifics about training purposes or target heart rate, you're definitely going to want to get together both with some information from your GP about your specific health state, and information from a coach or a trainer at the gym or the leader of an exercise group about what sort of scheduling they're planning for that exercise, what sort of facilities they have available to monitor your health and safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great answer. I imagine a lot of answers will come down to some form of it will be down to the individual on most of these things. So there's a couple, these questions sort of go together. So besides skating and boxing, what would be the top activities that you would recommend? And do you have any thoughts on swimming?
I'll do the second part last. I like swimming for a variety of reasons. The buoyancy or the lack of gravity effect takes a lot of loading off the musculoskeletal system. So if you're someone with knee osteoarthritis or joint issues that make it difficult to do gravity intensive or conventional exercise, swimming can be a great alternative there. Again, I think it would be a place to work with a group or work with a partner for sure who can help monitor. It's maybe not the right term, but help in case any issues arise. Not a bad idea to forewarn the lifeguard as well that you're new to swimming or returning to swimming and using as exercise for Parkinson's, so that they can be aware of maybe some extra attention or at least understand that situation. But in terms of other forms of exercise, I think it's unlimited. Again, I mean, safety is paramount, right? We want to make sure that people are safe in their participation. But that safety can be hopefully monitored and assisted by participating with a friend, participating in a group, participating with a expert coach, right? And so things like pole walking, dancing is popular, running itself, both conventional running or treadmill running, soccer, if there was a club soccer group, basketball, if you enjoy team sports, soccer, basketball, lacrosse, all sorts of things. And then again, depending on what your current exercise level is and where you're trying to go, we should really remember the exercise that can be embedded in a lot of other activities. So something like shore fishing, for example, putting the gear together, getting that organized, walking down to the shore, that amount of standing, moving along the shore if you're going to move to a couple different spots and that sort of thing, returning to the vehicle or however you got there, also has some exercise embedded in it, right? So if you used to, or you still do, love to fish, there's some exercise, the hiking in and hiking out of fishing, the gardening, all kinds of ways to find exercise inside regular activities of daily living, or not regular, but activities that we may do in our day.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I sorry if I can just jump back in for a second. Cycling is a great one as well, stationary biking or regular biking. If balance challenges, obviously there can be a bit of concern. Trikes, so three-wheel bikes make a great option there as well. I'm more fond of team sports, so I would certainly lean me personally now towards team activities there. But again, need to find the one that resonates with you.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Short one here. How many days a week would you recommend, or should people be aiming for?
Probably, I mean, we're wanting to be active, like intentionally exercise active 5 days a week, maybe with 2 different kinds of exercise. So cardiovascular on and vigorous on 3 days, stretching, yoga or something like that on 2 other days from that, right? But getting some sort of volume in that way so that we're getting, again, it was that resistance, endurance, stretching, and functional. So some ways to get tied into those on 5 of the days a week is a great goal to set for ourselves.
Great. Bit of a longer one here. When I exercise, after exercising, I find my tremor or some of my PD symptoms are actually worsened for a period of time. Am I doing something wrong? Should I not be exercising? I know that you're not working with this person individually, but do you have some input for someone who might find that they're not getting that, they're not seeing that symptom relief while exercising?
Well, this is after, but not maybe specifically while.
Oh, right.
But yeah, it could be, you could be exercising at a level of significant fatigue that is maybe causing part of that problem. If the tremor symptoms are not disruptive in and of themselves, I don't think I would be specifically concerned about that. May want to look at how the timing of the exercise is interacting with the timing of meds, and whether or not the duration of the exercise or the intention of the exercise is changing the way that those meds are getting metabolized as well. So I guess if I wanted to try that on myself or wanted to test that out, 2 things I would try is maybe a somewhat smaller dose of exercise and see if you still have the same issue afterwards, and exercise at a different time and see if you still have the same issue afterwards. And if you don't in either of those cases, then maybe that's the more functional approach to exercise for you.
Yeah, thank you. And last question here. So just again, if anybody would like to get their questions in here, please message them in the chat below. What are your thoughts on the PAR-Q to assess an individual's readiness for an exercise program?
Yeah, really, PAR-Q or something equivalent, really important for, again, figuring out if there are any of those confounders, figuring out what's maybe the right level to start. So for people who don't know, the PAR-Q is a physical activity readiness questionnaire developed by a Canadian research group. And it's a very common and robust screening method to see whether or not you have the physical capacity to get started in an exercise program. And we would often use as part of not often exclusive or always use it as part of a informed consent for exercise intervention. And so having again, the exercise group that you're working with, the leader there, or whoever the experts are, having done some of that screening and having a chance to feed that back and forth with your healthcare provider as well. If you do respond to one of the questions with a possible limitation on exercise, then get back to your healthcare group and say, hey, here's what came up on the PAR-Q. Are there some modifications I could make to make this exercise more safe and appropriate for me? Are there some schedule changes I could make to make that more safe and appropriate for me? How can I work with the information from this screening questionnaire to get the right exercise? But yeah, it's important to be pre-screened, and it's, if you get away from exercise for a while, it's important to be to do a new form of that evaluation as well, along with the person who'll be delivering the exercise and along with your healthcare providers.
Yeah, absolutely. You have one more. Just
Sure.
wondering if we could go back to the poster with the recommended balance exercises and talk a little bit more about that, and maybe where to find a copy of those exercises there.
This set here.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's what they're referring to.
So the paper is in the Journal of the American Medical Association, came out in 2021. I can send it along to our PA coordinator here in Lethbridge, and then she can forward it back to the group. A lot of these are balance challenging, or they would be balance challenging. They're ideas about overcoming gait impairments. A lot of them about freezing of gait initiation or ongoing freezing during gait. So again, sorry, I wanted to get the whole thing in, but it makes them all quite small. But if we look at something like this one right here, this is the idea of stepping over a upside down cane, giving yourself that visual cue to get your gait started. So I think they would provide some good ideas about balance promoting exercise or ways to improve balance, but they're as much about overcoming gait impairments for sure. But I'll pass it along to Brienne, and she can certainly get it back to the group. There is a little QR code here, but I would have no idea how to turn that into something actionable right now. I wanted to come back to the question about, we talk about boxing and skating, and are there other things? The real key inside exercise that we want to be functional for quality of life is transferability, right? So we want what we do in the exercise program to generate capacity that's useful in these activities of daily living. That's one of the things we like about balance challenging exercise, right? Because they then make you have balance, and we know we need balance for community locomotion. We know we need balance for independent activities of daily living around the house. We know we need balance in all these places, right? So something like the skating really challenges your balance. That can maintain or even improve balance, and that becomes highly functional. So we like that transferability. Things like the skating require big steps. I haven't shown it here, but we have a paper about the increase in arm swing that comes about from skating, because if you don't swing your arms, you're not skating, right? It doesn't look like that, and you actually don't go smoothly. That's similar to the boxing as well, right? The boxing really requires these large upper extremity movements to targeted places. It challenges your steps, all kinds of things. So finding something that transfers to the things that we want to do that aren't exercise is really key to capitalizing on that and making it worthwhile. Could be things like circuit training, could be, I talked about pole walking or guided hiking or the adapted fishing, or all kinds of things that, again, get us going through this locomotion, get us challenging balance, get us using our upper extremities and our lower extremities at the same time, that functional piece, and that with the right intensity can become moderate to vigorous exercise as well.
Great. Thank you very much. And for the client that posed that question, please contact your client service coordinator, and Brianne will be happy to forward this along to you there. And for anybody else that would like a copy of this, just reach out to your client service coordinator, and we'll be happy to forward that to you.